Hi, my name's Timothy Grossman, and I am the CEO and founder of A Source of Wellness based out of Lexington, Kentucky. And I wanted to provide the opportunity for you to meet this amazing individual. Her name's Dawn Moneyhan, and she is the chief clergy and spiritual leader for uh, her organization, which is a Indigenous Peoples or Native American organization, bringing culture, spirituality, and a sense of bringing back a lot of the old ways and creating accessibility, not only for tribe members and for people with that background, but really opening the way for all of us to become more more interested, more open, more aware of the reality, getting away from the preconceived notions that many people have. And she's doing this in an innovative way that I don't think has been done quite this way before. And so I wanted to just provide my brief introduction, a great amount of admiration for you, Dawn. And I'm going to just give you the floor. I'd like to let you talk about what it is that you're doing.
Oh, Ani, thank you, Tim, for your warm welcome. Make me blush over here. We are unique. You did peg that one right. We are doing something that has never been done before, and the it's difficult. There isn't a box for us to fit into, so we have to stop and explain ourselves to each person that we meet until we get through all of the stereotypes and preconceptions of each individual word in the title of our name. We call ourselves the Quawog Indigenous Culture Church, and we are an Indigenous cultural teaching organization. So that kind of sums it all up in one big mouthful.
So when people think of church, they think of this white building in the middle of a field with a steeple on top. And I just can't imagine that is how you're structuring your organization, Dawn, or that it has any specific adherence to what we think of as religion in the United States. Am I about correct with that?
You are right on the nail. You
Okay.
could not have explained that better. There is very much a preconceived recognition of the word church, and it is guided by Christianity. With our people, we were here before Christianity. So our cultures date back tens of thousands of years before Christianity ever hit the shores of North America. And once the colonists arrived, the conflict that ensued after that, leading into the genocide, our cultures, our existence was literally made illegal in this country. And that went on until 1978 when I was about 8 years old.
Wow.
So everything was kept secret and hidden in order for it to survive. My family was a victim to that. My father, before I was born, spent 10 years in federal prison for practicing our culture. He and my uncle got caught collecting wild rice, which was part of our natural food supply and still is. We are a Great Lakes tribe. I belong to the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians, and our original homelands are throughout Michigan, Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula, and wild rice is part of our ancestral diet. So it's a big part of our culture. So you can imagine in the 50s and 60s, practicing your culture just like a German would be making sauerkraut. We made wild rice. It was part of who we are, and it's part of our belief system as much as it is part of our diet. And going to jail for doing that.
Wow.
And that's what happened with my family.
You know,
And the prison experience really takes its toll. So it goes way beyond that.
we've talked a lot, maybe within the global conversation about religious pure persecution. And when we think about that, sometimes we think about the Spanish Inquisition, or we think about the Crusades, or we think about the Holocaust.
We think about the things that were taught in school.
Right.
We think about the things that are offered on TV for TV specials, especially education channels. The reason we don't think about our Native Americans is because you don't hear about it anywhere. And that is exactly why we are doing what we are doing here at the KICC, which is what we call ourselves. It's short for our very long name. It's time for the world to meet us and know us from us. From the very beginning of this country's founding, if we want to call it that, from a non-native perspective, all of our history has been given to the world as interpreted through the eyes and ears of non-Indigenous people. It was the non-Indigenous experience that dictated to the rest of the world who we were, what we believed, how we lived, anything about us. And I've had a few people mention to me about like the Wild Bill Western shows and stuff that natives actually participated in at one point. But what isn't understood about the Hollywood thing is, first of all, it's pretend. Second of all, those natives didn't have a choice. They were fighting for their own basic survival, and that was the only way to do it. They were given a script. They were told how to act. There are actually jokes that go on in some of the tribes among our own native peoples about some of the most famous movies out there where they have portrayed, Native Americans and speaking their own language. Most of it is just made up nonsense. And they laugh about that because nobody understands whether it is or not, because everything's been so secretive and almost lost.
Right. And I think that's what, really caught my attention. Now, a source of wellness, and we are a company, but we're also individuals, people that we embrace all spiritual paths. We embrace and honor all traditions. And, we believe that there is relevance, and that's not even probably the best term, but regardless of your spiritual leading, your spiritual path, it's not what someone else tells you is important. It's what you resonate with. It's what you hold in your heart. It's what comes through you as a being, as a human being.
It's also about your own personal experiences. Yes. That nobody can experience except you.
That's right.
You have to process your life by yourself, and you can reach out and ask for help, but the work itself has to be your own. Nobody can live your experience. My favorite phrase is to walk a mile in my moccasins.
Right. Yeah.
But where we started in this country that we call home, kind of was the invasion of our homelands by non-Indigenous peoples who just moved in and said, hey, this is ours now. I've asked a lot of people to watch the movie Avatar because it's a very, very accurate description of our very beginning.
It indeed is.
But the movie Avatar had a very different outcome. They were able to conquer the invaders and send them packing while allowing the allies to stay. Our outcome was the exact opposite of that, and we literally became the prisoners of our own homelands. And with that, our religious beliefs, our spiritual beliefs were also then outlawed. If we had been treated as equals and respected and honored when they first arrived here, our spirituality would have been recognized as a religion from day one.
Which brings me to this concept. Now, I've not discussed this with you before, but there is a juxtaposition when we say Native American, as though the American is a second thought. But how do you feel about, you're an American native? you were here in America and you are a native and your people are native to this continent.
But my
And,
people were here before this was America.
right. But now
So the native part comes first.
I was just thinking about this because I'm thinking, if we, and I'm just spitballing, like thinking out loud here, bringing this, your organization and like using the laws of the land, okay, to gain the same recognition as any other religious organization, which you have absolutely a right to. The term church has been used for ridiculous things, like I think that Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
They actually were part of our inspiration.
So yeah, so it's not far-fetched to say, well, look, these are your cultural, spiritual practices, and you want to be recognized, and you are recognized as a 501c3 organization, yes?
Correct.
And that you, because of that, have certain privileges that, like I said, I haven't seen it before, and I think it's so innovative. And in a minute, I want to ask you, I didn't mean to be like when I said American Native, it's just that you can't be displaced from the country that is, as of now, it shouldn't be a second thought or an afterthought or a.
For us, this is still Turtle Island and Mother Earth. And when you hear natives who are in touch with their culture and practicing and living their culture and traditions, that's what you'll mostly hear it referenced as Mother Earth and Turtle Island.
Turtle Island, yeah.
And it comes back to our creation story. But now that also depends on which tribe you're talking to. We have over 500, almost actually 550 registered tribes right now. There are still over 200 fighting for recognition. There are over 200 that are only recognized by their states. There are some that are fighting to get re-recognized after their recognition was taken away because the government wanted their land again. And then there are those that have been extincted already. So we're talking about a vast number of different cultures and peoples that have a different environment where they reside, where their homelands are. So all of our cultures are based off of our environment. Mother Earth provides for us. We nurture Mother Earth. She nurtures us. It's a continuous cycle.
And
our belief in Turtle Island is more of a Midwestern Great Lakes belief system. If you head out west to California, Arizona, New Mexico, their belief system is entirely different. Head into the middle of the country to Montana or the Dakotas, their belief system is entirely different. So it's really unique how each tribe has their own culture and belief system. But at the same time, it's really sad that until now, with us doing what we're doing, fighting our way through all of these preconceived boxes that the government has set up for us to fit into, I'm hoping others will follow. It's time for us to be able to take our place.
Right. And that was the only reason I juxtapositioned the words, because it seems as though it was a disservice at the very outset to say, well, here, we're going to give you a reservation, and that's it. And then
Well, that's not even it, though. Remember now, they also, once they moved the different tribes to the reservations west of the Mississippi, once they got them there, they started to realize they were running out of space. There were so many different tribes in one place. Oklahoma's a really good example of that. So they started spreading them out. Some tribes that were already in their original homelands on the western side of the Mississippi were moved to other places to make room for people from the east who were put there.
So they weren't a part of.
Then we have tribes that were settled in, like in the Dakotas and the Black Hills, until somebody non-native discovered something valuable in the area. So then they were relocated again, and then somebody finds something valuable on that land, so move them again. Some tribes have been moved to 3 or 4 different locations throughout history.
When I look at someone, now maybe I'm just a different type of person. I don't see a difference in the beingness of that person. I see into the eyes of the individual that they are just the same as me. We may look different. We may believe slightly different things. We may eat different foods. We may have different opinions about things, but we are truly looking at each other and seeing the sovereignty of that individual. It does nothing to do
That
with
makes you one of the special ones, Tim. I wish that was true with everybody. Um, I know there's a lot of hype out there right now with the expression about not seeing color. And what you're explaining has nothing to do with color, it has to do with humanity.
it has to do with humanity.
And if you remember again, if we go back a little bit in our history, and this really was not all that long ago, about the 1800s, late 1800s yet, we were still considered non-human. Our Native American people were deemed by the US government as non-human, which was their excuse to start up and put us into boarding schools and to indoctrinate us with Christianity so that they could civilize us and make us human. It's the same reason why when the treaties were developed and our reservation lands were developed, we were not allowed to own our own property anymore. So this vast land of Turtle Island that didn't belong to anybody but belonged to everyone at the same time. Now suddenly we didn't have anything that we owned. It was kept in what's called a trust, and those were set up because we were deemed incapable of handling our own affairs. And those trust funds actually continue today. So we're sitting here talking in 2022 on advanced technology that our ancestors couldn't even have imagined. And the US government still declares us unfit to handle and own our own property and our own affairs.
Ludicrous, right?
To you
Ludicrous.
and to me, part of the problem is the media, the lack of. If you ever pay attention when you're watching news on any channel, online or off, unless it is an independent, indigenous sourced news station, there is nothing about our Native American peoples in the news. They just don't talk about us.
The only news that sells is bad news, and that's what keeps people angry.
We
and
have so
afraid.
much of that. We have so much of that. We could just heap it on the world. And it's eye-popping to find out the statistics for Native Americans versus any other part of our populace. But if they do that, they have to acknowledge we're still here. And I have found over the last decade working at living history events in my area, the majority of the public believes we're already extinct. They think that when they see us out dancing, celebrating, doing educational events, they think that we're all actors and paid and we're just playing dress up for the day, because there hasn't been any way to learn about us until now. The tribes have held it in secret because it was forced. And when that legal force was stopped, well, then there was societal force. And by the time we got that far, the trauma and PTSD were so extreme, it became about fear.
Right.
So convincing the elders to teach anybody what they still remembered, if it was anything. There was also shame, because a lot of the elders that went through the boarding school system didn't remember anything. They were too small when they were taken from their families. And then when they were removed from the boarding schools, they were either adopted to a non-native family so that we could save the man and kill the Indian, which was an actual real thing that was a motto for the boarding schools back then. Or they were adults that were just turned loose into society, and they had no way to communicate with their own people anymore because they no longer spoke the language. And they were in a society that didn't want them because they were very obviously different. So we're talking as late as the 1950s and 1960s, all of these Native American people are turned into society in places they don't know, without family, without friends, without support systems, no jobs, no money, no resources, no land. And the only knowledge they have is boarding school. And some were still left with a vague knowledge of their natural cultural traditions, but those practices were at that time illegal.
So they were
Where do you go?
spiritually uprooted with no place to call home, no support. And we talk about like, oh, genocide that happens in other places, marginalization and ethnic cleansing that happens other places, but that happened here, and it didn't happen. It
One of the
happened.
things a lot of people don't know, Tim, is that not only did it happen here, but America, the United States of America, is actually the model for a number of other countries around the world where it was enacted also.
Well,
What was done to us was actually a big part of Hitler's playbook, and that's where he learned it.
well, this. I served in the military for 7 years, and my first platoon, when I was in the 101st Airborne, we had guys that were native, and they hailed from different places, and that carried through all my 7 years. We had guys, and it's not that it's not unknown that our Native Americans contributed materially to the success of World War II, the code talkers, yes?
Yes.
And, we would have discussions, and I would just like, tell me about what it's like. And they says, well, it's terrible. I was like, the reservations, they're terrible. It's you're lucky
The
if you have
poverty rates on a
electricity.
Native American reservation make the worst poverty-stricken areas of America look like palaces.
He told me, one of the guys told me that it was just as bad as a third world country with barely running water and barely electricity.
Oh, some reservations still don't have running water at all and have never had. The Navajo reservation is a real good example of that.
Yeah.
The reservation lands are vast and the water sources are scarce. On reservation lands, we are not allowed to tap natural resources without permission from the US federal government. That was a battle going on with the Navajo Nation and the federal government since the beginning of the reservations. What else the people don't usually know about the Navajo is that their water source, when they do manage to tap into it, is horribly polluted with uranium. The
Didn't know
US
that.
government went in to those lands and mined for uranium for decades. And eventually they pulled out, but they left the mess behind, never cleaned it up, and it tainted the groundwater. So these people have been restricted to these lands where they were literally being poisoned just by drinking the water. And they were given no other option for survival.
It makes Flint, Michigan look like you're drinking from a water hose.
It does. It does.
And,
And that actually continues today in both places, Flint, Michigan, and the Navajo Nation.
that's just, it's for me, it's chilling to think that we pride ourselves on, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that all men and women are created equal, and these high ideals, but
Some
there's
of
a
us have
content.
never been equal.
Some of us have never been equal. Some other people had to fight for, you know, hundreds of years to gain their rights. And then women had to fight to gain their rights. And now we're looking at, is there really equality? Is there really equity? And, I wanted you on here today to give you a platform to have a voice. And I also wanted, because what you're talking about, most people have no idea. And as well read and interacting with people as I have in the military, and then also going to different countries, seeing what a third world looks like, dealing with that, and even in the Balkans, fighting to stop ethnic cleansing. It just seems like, and I don't think it seems like, the reality is that, Dawn, your people have been forgotten, and not just your tribe, but the whole of the Native American society. And I think that it's time that you take a seat at the table and says, well, we're here, and we're going to use the mechanisms in place to step into our own sovereignty, to step into our own power, and to revitalize the culture and the spirituality. Because if we have none of that, then we have no roots. Then what do we have left? It's despondence.
I want to thank you so much for allowing me this platform. This is such important information that is not being given any other way. If you look on YouTube, there are so many videos that Native Americans are putting up there, and they're starting to speak out. This new younger generation of ours, we have raised them to be more vocal and more independent and to rise up, but they still need that leadership also from their elders. Our cultures, all of our Native American cultures are community-based, the very meaning of the word tribe. However, after the boarding school era, our people were no longer familiar with that lifestyle. Our cultures had been literally erased from all of these children that spent so much time in these schools. They were taught that they were evil and that their cultures were evil and would send them to hell. And Christianity was forced on these children, and they were raised with it. We have come to a unique situation right now where we are at a generation where very few people still alive today remember or know of a time before Christianity was with us in our cultures, before it was forced on and introduced to our people and forced to become a regular part of our functioning life. I'm part of a small group of Native American people right now, and I'm hoping that we are just beginning to open the doors and windows for others to follow. Like I said when we started, until this point, what the world knows about us isn't from us.
No.
And fear and the shame of all of the traumas that our people have faced to this point has prevented our elders from doing what we're doing right now. And we actually have to battle with some of those elders to do what we're doing right now because they don't approve. They would like it to stay secret because they're still afraid.
They're afraid.
And
yeah.
Considering what just happened this past week with the Supreme Court and watching them take away a right that was just finally secured 2 years ago, they have every right to be afraid. But my message to our elders, and this applies to the elders of all tribes here on North America, be it here in the States or in Canada, I understand the fear. Some of us lack that fear because Spirit fills us and tells us that we can conquer this. We have to do this. The only way to ever end the fear is to push through the fear. And I am ready to do that. I've been doing it my whole life. We all do that for our basic daily survival. We have to get through that fear just to function. I'm just taking it to the next level and saying, hey, wait a minute. We are still here and there's a place for us too. It's time that we're allowed to have it.
I love it.
We have something so important to contribute to the whole world right now. This climate change crisis that we're dealing with. Our Native people are probably more alarmed than anybody on the planet. And this applies to Native peoples in any continent around the world. We see what's happening. We understand why it's happening. And our forbidden cultures that have been silenced for hundreds and hundreds of years hold all of the answers to fixing it.
I think that there is definite gravity in what you just said, that you're in tune. You're in tune with nature. You're in tune with animals, and we think that maybe the world is just something that we get to pillage and it's just a rock that we live on. And I'm not entirely sure that's, you know,
We share a symbiotic relationship with our Mother Earth. We cannot survive without her. She can survive just fine with us or without us, but we cannot survive without her. It's a symbiotic relationship that is dependent. So
it,
when we don't take care of her, she can't take care of us. And in the end, the sacrifice becomes us because she can survive without us. So
so
there's a responsibility that comes just with existing on this planet. And all of these teachings that our culture has taught from infancy through death, it's all been stifled. It's been locked up and hidden just to keep it alive at all. And if we don't start sharing it, our planet is going to die.
so what I just heard you say is that our role with nature is interdependent. It is a synergy, a symbiosis. It is a working together and respecting. I mean, we've extincted so many forms of life and species,
Yeah.
and we think,
And
well,
each
it
and every
doesn't.
one of them performs an important function.
Yeah.
And it's why we have the mess we have today. When you interrupt that perfect cycle, the cycle that science and nature dictate on their own, the cycle that our great creator, whatever your religious belief, whatever your deity be it, that creator created that cycle. Not just the animals and the beings and the plants, created that cycle so that everything was dependent upon everything else. And
It's
now we have interrupted that cycle so much that it's off balance. And if we don't set it right, it can't continue.
it's kind of like introducing boa constrictors to the Everglades or carp
Yes.
to our streams, Asian carp to our. I mean, it's not something that's so far-fetched and esoteric that it can't be understood. We've done it over and over again by meddling and doing things that, defied the natural order.
Well, each one of
Um,
those things that you just mentioned contributed to where we are right now and
yeah.
what we're facing right now. And those are just, I mean, not even a drop in the bucket for what we've really done to this planet. So if we don't start not just trying to curb it, but find a better way to live our lives sustainably and in a healthy way for us and our planet, there isn't going to be any hope. The other problem that we have is that a lot of our Native American peoples no longer know this stuff either. The
That's
elders that I have known and met and learned from over the last 12, 13 years, most of them have walked on now. They're not with us anymore. So all of their experience, their knowledge, all of their teachings and their lessons, me and the others that they have told those things to and taught those things to, we're what's left of them. So if we don't share that, it doesn't go forward. We have a responsibility to teach our own people what's been lost and taken from them. But we are still a really small faction of the population. We make up roughly about 2 to 3% of the US population right now. 2 to 3% of us living the right way is not going to save our planet. So we have to not just teach our own and bring them home to our cultures, but we have to share this with the whole world and teach people the secrets that our cultures hold so that we can all change the way that we're living and contribute to saving our planet, because we have to contribute to saving ourselves.
Something that you said just struck me. If people were open-minded just enough to really feel what you're saying, and human beings, we suck at doing 180s, but if we're open-minded enough to feel and see what you're saying, then those micro adjustments that we could make incrementally by gaining more knowledge, human beings, well, we're curious, we want to know this, we want to know that, gaining more knowledge, and within that knowledge maybe shifting, because we don't have to be married to our ideas. We can divorce those things that don't work anymore and shift into a different paradigm slightly, because no one likes jumping in cold water. So I want to use that
But
segue.
that cold water is a little bit different when the foundation and when that lower level of water is a different temperature and much warmer.
Right.
So if we use our ancestral cultures and we as our foundation and we build from that, and we work in the modern day technologies and the lessons that we've learned since then, and we blend those two things together so that we have our today and our tomorrow to look forward to, there is hope. The other thing that I'm not hearing very much of out there, and I've mentioned this to you a lot because it bothers me tremendously, all of the conversations that I'm in, that I listen to about climate change and what we can do to slow it down or to try and stop it, I'm not hearing the all important question about how we're going to survive it. And that also is a secret buried within our Native American cultures. Tens of thousands of years. Think about that. How many different types of changes has this planet gone through over tens of thousands of years? What other peoples on this planet today are descended from those who have survived through all of those different changes? Not many. And yet here we are, 2 to 3% of the population, and nobody even knows we exist.
Well, that's a great, what you said is a great segue, that there is knowledge, and maybe it can just be a change in mindset. Maybe it can just be an appreciation, but I want to give you the floor now to kind of unveil what you've been working on and show us exactly what you have in mind. And of course, this is a strategic 50,000 foot overview, but I'd love for you to share with us exactly what you've been doing. And I think as you go through that, people will understand more beyond the words. And although I hope that they hit people very strongly, but see that there's a constructive framework that you put together. Would you mind sharing?
Oh, I would love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I put together a slideshow. It was intended as a donor presentation, and I'm going to just come right out and say that, because with Dawn, there are no secrets. There are no closed closet doors. Part of our lifestyle is about our teachings and our spirituality, and it causes us to be so honest that it really upsets a lot of people because it's not considered a normal thing anymore, apparently. Honesty can be very hard to swallow and stomach, so it's not always an easy way to live, but it's our preferred way to live because it's what our ancestors taught us was important. So you'll hear me throw little things out here and there. That's just me. I call it the quirks of Dawn. So I am going to turn my camera off and share my screen with you. And I'm going to take you through this slideshow that I put together to introduce us to the world. There we go. Can you see this okay?
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, this is our introduction frame. With me here on the screen, you will see Dr. Delia Ross. She is one of my tribe's elders, one of our most endeared elders and respected elders. Delia has been a teacher for 35 years. She got her doctorate in special education, and we wanted to include Delia with us today. We have a two-person presentation worked out to balance each other, but she had an emergency caller away, so I'm going to handle this for us today. I'm hoping we can do another show soon so that we can introduce Delia to the world, because she is just such a dear. She is a softer version of me. And it is said to me by other elders that as I age and reach that time, I will soften just the way Delia has softened. Right now, I am in this season of warrior and fighting for what we believe in and what we need to survive. And what we need is our planet and each other. It was still illegal to be me when I was 2. I was sorting through some photos and looking for something to contribute and really put some life to the time frame in the work that I do and the lessons that I teach. And a lot of it is really history lessons. Until the world knows what we've been through, they can't understand where we are at right now. So imagine a celebration with your family. These are my cousins and my little sister celebrating my second birthday. And at that time, everybody in that photo, it was illegal to be us. We could not practice our cultures, speak our languages, wear our native traditional clothing, play our instruments, sing our songs. All of those things were illegal. You can look on the picture there, it says 72. That was the year that picture was taken. I had long hair at one time. This is the only picture I still have left where it showed any inkling of it. Still really hard to see. It went all the way down my back. One of the tactics that we have been learning about as the information about the boarding schools is coming out now was that the nuns and the priests, as soon as they got these children to the schools, they cut their hair. There is a deep spiritual connection between us and our Mother Earth and through our hair. Sweetgrass is one of our sacred medicines, and it is the hair of our Mother Earth. So we grow our hair long to honor and bond and make that connection with our Mother Earth. So it was one of the first dehumanizing things that were taken from the children at those schools. But those things were not happening just in the schools. Some of us were living with those things at home. Part of the extinction plan for our people was to get us interracially married and breeding so that we could thin out the bloodlines. And then we end up with this thing called blood quantum. And if you are not enough Native American, you're not recognized as Native American. We are still the only population in this country today where that applies. We have to be card-carrying members to prove who we are and that we belong to a tribe. I was really disturbed a couple of months back in a tribal group on Facebook, and I saw people on there, Native American people, measuring each other by blood quantum and asking them, which tribe claims you, as their only way to identify as Native American. Well, that eliminates a large portion of our Native American population because we have descendants that are still Native. And a good example of that would be me and my own children. I'm an enrolled member of my tribe. I am 1/4 Native American. My children are then 1/8 Native American, therefore do not qualify. So in the eyes of the tribe and the eyes of the government, the eyes of society, my children are not Native American. They're not deserving of their cultures, their traditions, all of the things that mom lives. They're not deserving to have or learn all of those things. And it's just wrong. Our culture teaches us that we have a responsibility to provide for and nurture our planet and to make things better for the next 7 generations. On the path we are on today, if we continue, our planet isn't going to be around to sustain 7 more generations. So our culture is not only important to saving our planet, but our own people and their personal identities. Marriage ceremonies. And this is part of our plan with becoming a church instead of a public nonprofit. Up until we existed, all of the research that we were able to do, all of the questions we've been able to ask, every wedding ceremony in the United States, in order to be legal, had to consist of either a Christian-based ceremony or a civil-based ceremony. Our Native American ceremonies were not allowed to be legal and stand alone for marriage. It was not recognized in any state here in the country. Now that we exist, that is no longer true. We now, as ordained ministers and leaders of a cultural teaching church based solely on Native American culture, we now have the ability to perform our Native ceremonies alone, and they stand as legal. So we have already been breaking glass ceilings. Aside from that, you mentioned earlier about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monsters. So I'll pull this slide up here quick. And you'll look also to the right side of the slide, there are all the IRS documents. When we first got started, we were involved in living history events. These are volunteer events and they teach. Everything is focused on education. They get quite expensive. So they're difficult to do. It's a lot of physical labor. We wanted to localize, we wanted to stabilize and have one place that we could do all of this and people could come to us on their time instead of chasing us around from location to location. So we had to incorporate, we had to make it a legitimate business. During that incorporation process, I asked our lawyer about tax deductions and property taxes came up. And he laughed at me and he said, well, not unless you're a church. And I said, well, that's not impossible. So he proceeded to tell us about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monsters and how they came to be. They are a group of people, well, they started out as a group of people, activists, who decided they wanted to wear colanders on their head for their DMV photos. And the only legal way to make that happen, they made it a church. They share a same or similar belief system, and their activism bonds them in that belief system. So according to US law, dictated by our Congress and our IRS, they were a legal church, and they are actually still a legal church today. So while we were filling out our IRS forms, trying to fit into all of these preconceived boxes for a public charity, I struggled and slaved over these documents for days because we didn't fit anywhere. There was nothing in the system that allowed for what our cultures actually really are and define as the way we practice and live them. So I was struggling, and every couple of paragraphs it would say, except for churches. And I was reminded of that conversation. I said, well, why not? It didn't hurt to look. So I went back and I started over as if we were a church. And sure enough, we started to fit. The reason for that is because all of the native cultures that exist in this country and in Canada are spirit-based, environmentally spirit-based. So that connection of spirit and environment and belief system all tied into one creates a lifestyle, kind of the same way Christianity works with Amish culture, the same way that the Jewish community functions or the Muslim community. We just are not recognized as such yet, as the same kind of functioning religious-based culture, because culture and religion have been separated over the generations, and now it's time for us to bring that back together. Our doctrine, which we needed because we are a church, we opted to work with the 7 grandfather teachings for our doctrine because as we have talked to, learned from, and associated with people from other tribes over the years, this was the one founding doctrine all of the tribes seem to recognize and respect and honor in their teachings as a foundation. Everybody has their own wording to it, but the meaning is still there. It's the same thing. So according to the Anishinaabe worldview, humans do not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. Therefore, kinship among all of creation, not the mastery of our relatives, other humans, animals, plants, and etc., is vital to harmonious living. To adhere to this philosophy is to be guided by the following values. And those are the 7 grandfather teachings. The text that you're looking at on the screen right now, we adopted that from the Leech Lake Tribal College. We really felt that their wording of our belief system was spot on, and we couldn't say it better ourselves. So we adopted it as it was written. Honesty, maintain truthfulness, sincerity, and fairness in all of one's actions, and possess the ability to manage confidential information and communicate with others fairly and truthfully. It's not a real hard concept, but it's really a forgotten thing in our society today. And I have noticed that it's one of the aspects of our culture that I get greeted with surprise or sometimes even shock, that our values are so, oh, what is the word I'm looking for? Solid, I guess would be the best way to say that. It's basic and it's very solid. Truth, speak as honestly as one can according to one's perception. Be loyal in all relationships and avoid hypocrisy. It really is a basics of living. Humility, recognize oneself as an equal part of creation. Be careful what one says around others. Demonstrate empathy to others. Be respectful of the thoughts and ideas of others. Recognize one's weaknesses and acknowledge the capacity for self-growth, and develop and practice good listening and observation skills. All of those things together make up humility. And when we practice these things in our lives, they make for a good life. We live it in a good way, and it's responsible, and it honors the things that our ancestors taught us were the most important parts of life. Taking care of our planet and thus taking care of ourselves and each other. Love, we all know this one, I hope. Work cooperatively and harmoniously with others, show kindness and compassion, demonstrate acceptance and the empowerment of others, offer hope, encouragement, and inspiration. Wisdom, seek guidance from elders and advisors, take time to reflect upon experiences, acknowledge the opportunity to learn from others, persist in acquiring knowledge and improving skills, and strive to accomplish goals and dreams. That kind of encompasses exactly what we're doing here. Working with the collection of the teachings and the knowledge and the wisdom of all of the elders that have passed those things on to us and trusted us with them. Courage, face difficult situations with bravery, acknowledge one's personal weaknesses and develop strength to combat them, demonstrate the ability to take initiative and speak when asked. Respect, accept cultural, religious, and gender differences, maintain high standards of conduct at all times, safeguard the dignity, individuality, and rights of others, practice ethical behavior at all times. And I'm going to actually pause it here because, there we go. That doctrine is what encompasses our church, our mission, the same way as any doctrine for any other religious church or organization out there. And I want to point out that there is no mention of a deity anywhere in that doctrine, and that is with purpose. We are not looking to indoctrinate anybody. And I really feel that's important because of that word church in our name. People hear that and they run for the hills, understandably so. I mean, we don't have the greatest relationship with the church in any form, but I feel it's important for people to understand that we're not teaching about our deity and our spiritual beliefs the same way that the average church teaches of theirs. We're not gathering in a building once a week and singing praises to our deity. We are gathering in a round table once a week, and we're discussing the world's problems and our responsibilities in that. We're discussing how we live our lives and treat others. We're discussing the different portions of that doctrine that I just read to everybody here. So we are not a typical church. We will never be a typical church. And I could probably spend an entire video talking just about that part of our church and our culture and our belief system and my personal part and role in that. But I want to move on. Our inspiration, this is what really gets exciting and gets me excited when I talk about it. Our inspiration, I mentioned earlier, we started out with about a decade's worth of living history events. I put together these slides, just a couple of pictures. I have entire SD drives full of pictures from these events. It's a lot of physical labor. You can see how many people it takes just to set up one tent canopy, and each person who is involved is setting up a tent and a table and a teepee and all this different equipment. And you can also see that we have elders that participate, and it's a lot of work. So as our bodies begin to break down, it didn't make sense anymore for us to travel everywhere. The rules change with every location we go to because it's always a new host. We never know what we have to work with until we get there. We have to be creative and inventive. And at the same time, we have to stick to these rules of only the 1800s portrayal, which really bothers me. Those people out there who do know of us yet and who do understand we're still here, when they think of us, they get a couple of depictions of us that are clear and constant. One comes from Hollywood, and the other comes from events like this, often called rendezvous, where it is strictly within the rules. You have to dress period correct for the late to mid 1800s. So I ran into a problem at an event one year. I was hanging my dream catchers up for sale above my table, and one of the people associated with the host site was just pitching a fit, and I didn't understand what the problem was. They were all authentic. I made everyone by myself, handmade. They were bright, they were colorful. I used natural cotton yarns, really careful to make sure that they fit with the theme and the rules of what we were doing. So I didn't understand the reason for him to be so upset. It turned out he was upset that they were so colorful. And that just really stood out for me, but it made sense. Having to work within all of these rules, well, most of the photographs from the late 1800s haven't been done in Technicolor, so they're all in black and white. So the only depictions of our people that non-Native Americans work with are black and white photographs. So they see us in black and white, and they see us lacking color. At the same time, there's an undercurrent in there. The melanin in our skin has always been that thing that deemed us non-human. That's what deemed us as a threat. So let's get rid of the color. And when you really start thinking about what it all means when it comes together, it's kind of a scary concept. And once I realized it, I felt I had a responsibility to fix that. So our goal was to find a stationary location so that we can set up and leave it there, and people can come to us on their time. They can book a schedule with us just like they book anywhere else, tourist attraction. You know, you want to go to a water park and stay a weekend or an overnight in a specialty suite. Instead, come and stay with us, come and learn from us, because I am of the firm belief, and Spirit continues to tell me that I'm right. If you build it, they will come. And I know from our experience with these events that we've done, when they come, they participate. A few photos here of our previous event last July in Beaver Dam. It was the first time we had ever been there. We were working with a skeleton crew and some really horrible weather, and yet we still had people everywhere. Our tomahawk thrower and teacher, he is at almost every event that my husband and I have attended for the past 10 years. And he admitted last year that was the busiest event he has ever been at. He didn't get a break the entire day. The people came nonstop. And what really stood out is that our event was a little bit different from what all of the others were doing. We were doing what the KICC is now going to expand on and do in a stationary location. We turned it around. Instead of the pioneer settler stuff with indigenous on the side, we were indigenous with a little bit of the pioneer and settler stuff on the side. And the concept really threw people. They were confused when they got there. They were looking for things that weren't there. They didn't understand why the indigenous was the focus until we explained it to them. I've talked with you, Tim, and I want to share with others now a little bit about this connection. We are all connected. As I learned and researched our Native culture and traditions and listened to our elders, it occurred to me early on, my knowledge of indigenous cultures around the world, there was a commonality starting to form. The skill sets of all indigenous cultures worldwide are basically the same. What makes them different is the spiritual and religious connotations and the environment in which they're happening. The religious and spiritual connotations tend to come from that environment, so we form a culture. But if we go back to the very basics, we are still all connected, and those secrets are still all hidden within every single indigenous culture on the planet. We know these things because of our own indigenous culture and the fact that we still practice it as such. We're still very connected to our ancestors from tens of thousands of years ago. So we want to teach everybody how to make that connection with their own cultures, those own skill sets, the environmental based way of living. And they're free to apply their own religious and spiritual belief systems to those skills. What's important is that we learn those life skills. So we want to start out with a Wigwam Village. This is the village of my ancestral people. Our Great Lakes tribes tended to live in wigwams during the winter months and used teepees only on occasion for travel. We were a very stationary group of people. We didn't travel a lot during the course of a year, except, and I will say this, there's always that exception, except during times of migration. Our plan is to build from different trees and different shapes and styles so that we are representing more than just our own tribe. We want the world to understand that each tribe out there is unique and an individual. And while we share some of the same practices, there are many different methods to do that, and the outcome looks a different way in each case. And then we want to build our teepee village because, of course, it's exciting to finally get to walk into and explore a teepee, but sleeping overnight in a teepee is a whole nother story. We have workshops that we hold in the teepees. And I learned from personal experience when I first started doing this, that the sound inside of a teepee is amplified on the outside. So when I got bored, I would sit inside of the teepee and sing. And when I would come out, there would be crowds of people standing around me clapping. I didn't even realize they were hearing me until I heard somebody else talking a little loud in the teepee next to me, and I understood the amplification. So teaching how to survive in a teepee, how to overnight in the winter as well as in the summer months, these are all really important survival skills. We are dealing with climate change right now that is leveling entire communities, cities across the country, cities around the world. And it's leaving people in a crisis situation without housing. And the wigwams and the teepees both offer that easy, simple, and mobile form of housing when needed, or a sturdy, stable structure that is long-term sustainable when needed until they can rebuild and relocate or whatever it is they need to do to pick up and go forward. So these skills are not known by many and yet needed by everyone. The teepees at night all lit up. We do this as a display at these events so that we can let people know that no, they're not completely see-through. There is privacy, but also they can be absolutely just beautiful. The different paintings on them, the different colors and shades of light bulbs that we put in them. We can really dress up our display of nighttime teepees while we're enjoying all of the modern conveniences inside. We don't have to give up comfort in order to use the tools that are available to us and at our fingertips in emergency situations or as a long-term sustainable situation for people who are homeless. people who are very poor and can't afford what society tries to force on them. Our herds of bison and elk. These are going to be a center and a focal point of our camp. This is going to be our food supply, and not just for us, but also for our community. Wherever it is we are able to finally settle and get started building this, we're going to start with the elk, and then we will bring in the bison as we're ready for them. But we want to teach everybody about these majestic animals. These are native animals to this part of the country and to most of North America. I was really surprised to find that not many people understand that bison roamed Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, all the way up to Maine at one time in history. And when they were wiped out by the settlers when they arrived, those populations were so diminished, only protected in certain areas until they were almost extinct. A lot of people don't know that their populations were so widespread. Not only is it time to bring that back, but it's time to teach people to understand these animals so that we can sustainably bring them back. Part of our cultural practices and teachings are about lack of waste. And we successfully use these animals for food, but we also use them for so many other things. Our ancestral teepees were made out of bison's hides instead of canvas. We now use canvas because it's more practical and it's less expensive, much easier to come by because our bison population is so rare right now. Excuse me, sorry, that touches me. That makes me so sad that these animals are dwindling in population the way they are, and that we need so much to bring them back, and not enough people are trying to do that. But we use the horns, we use the hooves, we use the organs, we use the bones, we use the teeth. There is not one part of these animals that we cannot use for something. And we want to teach that to the rest of the world, so that when our hunters are going out and they're finding their food supplies, they're understanding there's a responsible way to use these animals without wasting what was given to us. Here again, I will reference the movie Avatar. Our world right now, and not just the United States, but the whole world, is so wasteful. And that's a big part of why we're in the situation that we're in. We're not living sustainably. We're not living responsibly. We're living in luxury. We're living based on greed. And there's an easy way to refer back to a sustainable way of living without having to give up the luxury. And that's something else that our culture teaches. And if we don't teach it to the world, nobody's going to understand that. We have sacred medicines. We understand that plants are medicine and not food. We understand that there are certain ways to use them and certain ways not. But that means we have to nurture them. It means we have to grow them. We have to protect their wild populations. When we harvest, we have to make sure that we don't wipe them out. When we use these things ourselves, we have to grow more so that we don't deplete what's already out there, and then the planet is left with nothing. So we have planned to grow all of these medicines in ample supply for our own use and for anybody else who needs them. We are looking forward to an opportunity to help supply the tribes who are stuck on reservation lands in poverty, and lands that are, too difficult to grow some of these plants because they don't have the resources. We have to remember that reservation lands were unwanted pieces of land, used up pieces of land that were no good for farming and for keeping animals and for people, for that matter, alive. So these lands, even after all of this time, still need nurturing and protecting. And some of these plants don't always grow well in every climate. So we have the ability to do something unique, and we want to take advantage and teach everybody about each plant, how to identify it when they come across it when they are out in the field, how to harvest it responsibly when they do need to take it, and how to give back and plant something new, nurture what's already there and just starting to sprout, whatever they can do to help keep it sustained. This also applies to our trees. We want to build a tree fairy village, I guess would be an appropriate description of it. We want to add some solar powered fairy lights so that it's a visible encounter that people will remember. We understand that as teachers, we have to communicate what we see to other people who may not see it the same way or may not see it at all. So visuals are a really wonderful teaching skill, and we're going to try and create as many of those as possible. The trees are also medicine. The trees are shelter. The trees are warmth. They provide so much of what we need to survive, so we need to protect them. So this will be both a conservation and a learning opportunity for our trees. And the power of our planet, solar, wind, hydropower. We are planning to use every renewable resource that we can possibly make happen. As much off-grid living as we will be allowed by law and physical ability. And we want to do it with as little waste as possible, using both our culture and modern science together to create the healing that our planet needs. And in doing all of that, we create an environment and an atmosphere of healing for the people and the animals too. As we were putting all of this camp together, we came up with one little problem at the end. If we were going to teach all of this stuff and people were going to come to learn, how were we going to get them to use this once they left us? How were we going to teach them to actually retain this information and incorporate it into their own lives? Because if they're not going to do that, then we're just talking to hear ourselves talk. So we designed, oops, I forgot one thing. I will back up to that because that actually is not part of the survival events. We designed a survival event that utilizes each and every one of the survival skills that we're going to be teaching. And we will be explaining the why, the how, all of the ancestral cultural information that comes with it, so that the world gets to know who we are from us. But what's most important is that they take the skills away. So they go home, they practice these skills because they have something to come back for. A few times a year, we are going to hold survival events. At the start of the event, people will be set up in teams. They will be handed a list of items that they will have to gather and collect and bring back with them at the end of their journey. They will be given only the items that our native ancestors would have had pre-colonization period. So basic shelter, basic food that will sustain them but may not be all that appetizing. Incentive for them to go out and use the skills that we teach them about finding food, creating shelter, creating heat source, the ability to cook their food. And we are going to also plan to include a few extra hidden adventures that offer up a realistic idea of what it was like for our ancestors back during those times by listing an encounter with one of the other teams that forces an interaction where they have to get one item that can only be received from another team. They have to successfully barter and trade. And according to indigenous culture, they have to share a meal together, help each other, and share that time together. And they have to do it without the ability to speak to each other. We are living in a time where we still have this horrible communication gap. And this is part of our contribution to resolving that. Language is not just verbal. And we're living in a time in our society where we rely on verbal for more than any other type of communication, and it's failing us. Emotions get thrown in and it turns into something entirely different without even intending. So we want to teach people how to communicate and connect to each other again without that intrusion. And it requires the use of body language and learning from all of the animals that we learn about, how they communicate with each other, so that we can connect, not just with our planet, but with each other. And we can do it happily and peacefully without conflict. And then come wintertime, let's back us up here, we have the snow snake. I had a really hard time finding any photographic materials to use to put a slide together for the snow snake, because it is, again, another very hidden part of our culture and not very well known. This is an ancient sport that dates back to our ancestors from thousands and thousands of years ago. And we still actually play this game today. It's an all ages game where even children and elderly can have fun. It involves using a branch, a dowel, some type of a stick, and shaping it into a snake. And then we use the snow that Mother Earth so graciously provides us in this area of the country every year. And we carve our channels in the snow, and we send our snakes down, and we measure distance. We get to paint our snakes. We get just a lot of fun gathering as a group together to share an activity in the cold when most people are hiding indoors. It's just a wonderful sport that I'm hoping we can really regenerate the interest in it among our Native people. Here in Wisconsin, we have 11 Native American tribes, and we hear almost nothing about any of them. And I think that's really sad, and it's uncalled for. So I'm hoping with our snow snake events, we'll be able to start competitions that the tribal members can help bring their snow snakes out and help teach the general public about our event. And we can offer competitions and eventually push this all the way to the Olympics, because I am of the belief it is an ancient tradition among an ancient people who are still here. If there is any game that belongs in the Olympics, it's this one. So I'm hoping that we can fight for that as well. And then I will go ahead and finish us up here just with my closing slide. We are available to the whole world, and I say that with a smile on my face. Anybody can contact us via email at the KICC3, the number 3, @gmail.com. And you can visit our website. There are buttons all over the website to contact us and reach out. There are donation buttons on every page. TheKICC.org, THEKICC.org. And I will go ahead and call this finished up with my presentation and turn it back over to you, Tim.
Wow, that was just absolutely amazing. I mean, what you just illustrated, was comprehensive and non-dogmatic. Experiential is the other word that comes to me mind. I think that forgive me if I forget the values. There were 7 of them, yeah.
Yes.
And honesty, integrity, being truthful, being humble. Those are things that everybody can learn from. And, love, creating, community and seeing and working together, capitalizing, I guess you would, on each other's strengths, but also helping build each other up where you're not as strong.
Well, and there's also capitalizing on each other's weaknesses, because if we don't have our weaknesses, we don't learn.
That's right. Yeah.
And when we share those weaknesses with each other, we learn together from each other, so that when we are focusing on strengths together, we grow those strengths together.
Wow. So, thinking about like 5 takeaways, I see this as you've built something, Dawn, that is using the current infrastructure, the legal structure that we have. And although it is technically the legal definition is being called a church. There's also a lot of benefits that come from that you fall squarely within. And my second takeaway is that you're now able to provide marriage ceremonies.
We are able to provide all of our ceremonies, not just marriage, but also funeral and any other blessing ceremony that is needed by any of our people or anybody who shares a common belief with us. We're able to perform all of those, but more than just the ceremonies, because we are a church, we have this ability to create programs to help other people that we would not be able to do if we were any other type of entity. And this is where I want to introduce something that is not part of our slideshow yet, because it was kind of kept under wraps. It was supposed to be at the end of all of this where we were already set up and ready. But our Veterans Homeless Village is something very near and dear to my heart. I am an ex-military wife. My husband was a military brat. My father was in the Army. My uncles were all in the Army. I come from a very long history of military family and also a lot of military friends. So I understand the crisis out there. My son-in-law right now is a military veteran who served 3 tours in Iraq and came home to us injured and damaged the way all of the rest of our veterans are coming home. Anybody who has seen combat is coming home with PTSD without a question. And many of these people are being completely forgotten by society and shunned by the government that sent them to be damaged in the first place. And I have a real problem with that. Our heroes are the least respected people in our country right now. And they're doing a job that is very unpopular because of the morals and capitalistic standards that are at conflict right now in our country and in our world. And I don't see a whole lot of credit given to the struggle that they're facing out there, but more than that, there's no help. When I've gone to like carnivals and county fairs over the years, I don't give much to the charitable stuff that's out there because I don't have much, but it's always the veterans organizations, the grassroots local veterans organizations that are really helping the veterans. Those are the ones that get my money. Well, I needed to do more. What we have here is an opportunity for our homeless veterans to not be forgotten, to not be forced back into a society that they can't handle, that doesn't really even want them damaged and broken, because that means responsibility to them. It means acknowledging them and having to care for them. What we want to do is help, not just to help them heal, but to teach them our way of life, our Native American culture, so that when they leave us after 1 year in our program, spending every season for 1 year with us to learn how to function, to learn how to homestead indigenous style, we can also hook them up then with the resources through their VA benefits so that they can purchase land of their own and they can replicate for themselves with our support so that they can sustain themselves in a healthy, better way, have a happy life in a way that society will not shun them, and they won't be in danger being out on city streets and in places where they're being rounded up and just listed as rejects to society because they're homeless or because they have a problem. Well,
Right.
Society caused their problem in the first place. It's long overdue that we help them. So the KICC is really eager to get this program up and running. Winter is fast approaching, and every winter there are so many that are stuck out in the cold. We turn on TV and watch news reports in colder climates around the country. All of these people that freeze to death at night because they have nowhere to go. Families of veterans, they won't go to the homeless shelters because it forces them to separate. Men and women can't stay together. Children can't be with their fathers. Well, that's not right. These are the people that defend our country and defend our freedoms, and we're telling them they can't even be with their families because we sent them somewhere and damaged them? That's wrong. So following our 7 grandfather teachings and understanding the right way to live our lives, we have to apply that. And we want to start with our veterans. We want to build them a wigwam village. We want to put our cob building skills to use. So each wigwam will have a cob interior. It will have a wood cook stove. It will have a fireplace. It will have a sink. It will have running water, a shower, a bathroom, the basic necessities that anybody needs for shelter and some level of comfort. And we are going to walk them through our homesteading program one step at a time, firsthand, so that they can experience it, not just read a book about it, which means they can learn the hard parts of it. They can practice with supervision and help and guidance until they master a skill or until their questions are all answered. They need to be able to experience it hands-on and go through all those trials and errors, because that's part of life, and that's how we learn and how we do better. And when they leave us, they will have all of those skills. And like I said, us as a support system. So if they have a problem later, they have a community to fall back on, because tribal living in a nutshell is about community. It's about taking care of each other.
3 years that I was working at my decade as an advocate, it was the holistic work that I saw shifting and creating freedom. That's why I do what I do now. I saw freedom happening, and it wasn't easy, but like I said, a lot of us don't shirk away from hard. We'll run towards it.
I have found in my life that the things most worthwhile in life do not come easy, because if they came easy, we would not appreciate them and respect them.
So, yeah, it's true. Nothing worth having is an easy endeavor. It takes a lot of grit and a lot of guts and a lot of tenacity. The last thing I'll say, before we sign off, is that the other takeaway I received was that the sustainability and those concepts, the working together, the teamwork, the building a community. And this is not I don't hear you saying that this is we want to be special or another group or be recognized or have some sort of special status or any of that. What I hear you saying is, we know where we've been. We see where we are today. We're ready to step into the spotlight and share with anyone who's interested, especially those who don't have a tribal home, especially those who these are their ancestral roots, but it's not excluding any individual who has a heart to want to learn or know. And then finally,
what we want, I can sum that up really quick and easy for you.
Okay.
What we want is to be acknowledged, and we want to be respected. That's really what we want. If we get those 2 things, we can teach what we need to teach, and those who are receptive of it will grasp it, and those who are not can go their way. We just need to be acknowledged and respected.
Dawn, thank you so much. I honor you, and I truly thank you for your courage, for your commitment, and for your willingness to carry the torch. And I hope that I actually have a very good feeling that this is going to work well for you.
Oh, I have no doubt it will. Yeah. We have a lot of struggles to face, but we'll get there because we don't have another choice. Giving up means giving up on our planet and our species, and I'm not ready to do that.
Right.
So thank you for this opportunity to share all of this with the world.
You're
Blessings
welcome.
to you and to everybody who's watching.
Thank you.